Thanks for joining us. So, Anthony at RPM, I think most of you guys in the audience have probably heard RPM's story, but it might be helpful just to start there with how fast it's grown, what it looked like when you joined to where it is today.
Yeah, for sure. So I actually joined RPM about a year and a half ago. And so RPM Living's a property management company. We have over 200,000 units that we third party manage. We actually have about 30,000 or so that we actually own and manage as well. But the story of RPM is a pretty crazy one. I went and pulled some data that's what I do, right? And took a look at 10 years ago, how many units we had. We had 5,000 10 years ago. And, since that time, it's obviously a considerable amount of growth. And very rapid growth over a very short period as well. And so a big thing for RPM and frankly, when I joined, the opportunity there was, how do we scale up the underlying foundation that supported all of our BI initiatives and other integrations to not just match the scale, but kind of catch up to the size we were and prepare for scale in the future. So it was definitely a big task when I joined the company. Lots of opportunity, but also a really great organization to join into, one that values growth and the opportunity to grow with them.
And I think just a quick introduction for myself. I work at a prop tech fund. We just invest in technologies that service companies like RPM. RPM's an investor in our fund, and I think we've been really impressed to see the just level of growth here. I think we've heard from a lot of our partners in the industry. As acquisitions and construction have slowed down a little over the last couple of years, it's given them time to refocus on updating their technology stack, making sure operations are running smoothly. I think you've had a bit of a different problem set where you're building the plane while flying it as well, right? You're adding units constantly. You guys are growing at an incredible pace, and you've been tasked with building a technology stack and updating a technology stack under that. Can you just talk a little bit about maybe what your first thoughts were first couple days in the job and what's given you conviction that you guys can build a best-in-class technology stack at RPM?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny that you mentioned the building the plane while you're flying it. So the analogy that I use is a lot of time, I think that's what we do in technology. You're always building the plane while you're flying it. But I kind of extend that metaphor a little bit and say it's almost like when you were little and you try to ride two bikes at the same time. If you ever did that, this is like we're building the plane while we're flying it, but we're also flying the existing plane, right? Because we have a legacy warehouse that was in place when I started, right? And that warehouse was built for a company that was much smaller. It was architected differently, and what it was set up, it could handle when you were a much smaller size. But over 200,000 units, the thing that I walked into that made it really clear what we needed to do, frankly, was the capacity of my team was spent so much just on trying to keep up with that scale and less about innovation and how do we continue to get better and offer better products to the organization. So at RPM, one of the things that I think has driven a lot of the success that we've had is the willingness to see opportunities and then take those opportunities and take advantage of them. And so I think that a lot of that comes from, we're still founder led. So Jason, our CEO, he's definitely a person and it sort of permeates through the organization, but he's a person that sees opportunity and goes towards it. Like he's not he doesn't like kind of go away from discomfort. Like if that's where the opportunity is, whatever it is, we're going to go and we're going to look at it. And I really heard that message pretty consistently actually on the way in, frankly, at RPM. And even when I arrived, it's like, we know that there's something that just doesn't feel right. Everything seems really hard to do. Are you going to be can you help us? Like, can you help figure it out? And so I didn't even really introduce myself, but I actually oversee product management and data engineering at RPM. So one of the first things that we did is we did stand up like a product management organization just to help us to better qualify work and understand the benefits that we could bring. But then it was very quickly going to that data foundation. But I think with any initiatives, when you talk about technology and you talk about data, right, you do need that buy-in from leadership, and that just needs to be a part of the work that you're doing, because you're doing work that is very sexy at the start when you're building a foundation, but I mean, it's critical to the work that you do, right? And so, you wouldn't want to, if there's a cracked foundation, the metaphor I like to use, like if you're working with a cracked foundation, right, you don't hurry up and build a house because you're excited about the kitchen. You fix the foundation, and so that's really what we've spent really about 9 months doing, and really in the past 3 to 4 have started now producing product on top of it.
That's great. And I think, we're a small organization at RET. We've got, I don't know, 12, 13 employees, 8 investment professionals. We put in a new CRM last year and it was incredibly painful. A lot of grumbling. I think you guys are operating at a much larger scale. You've got not only centralized ops, but also distributed property teams. And I think everybody knows we have to build the right data foundation, and the eventual output may be reporting for the executive team or for regionals, but it starts with, the people on the ground doing things the right way and building the foundation in how they use the products that you guys are rolling out. So can you talk a little bit about how you've handled that change management process, how you demonstrate small wins to get the entire organization on board as you guys roll out this new data foundation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that generating the small wins of that question is really a key part to it, right? Because people are going to tell you all the things that they want, whether they need them or not, right? And that part of it becomes the work and part of what you do when you talk about product. But what it's important to do is there's also going to, or I should say that there's also going to be skeptics typically that you're going to run into as well. And I think skeptics are actually really helpful. They're really helpful for the work that you're doing because they help to inform kind of what the benefits are that you can provide, and they're challenging the work that you're doing in a pretty healthy way, right? As long as they're healthy about it, right? But I mean, from skepticism, you can actually end up building a much better product, and you do that by addressing what the underlying questions are for that skepticism, is really understanding it, right? They're not like excited to see you fail. It's just like, I've heard this before, maybe. So, I think a key part is building those relationships, understanding what's involved in any of that skepticism, what's underneath that skepticism you might be hearing, and then offering the wins along the way, right? You want those people will ultimately become your advocates if you can do that. So, I mean, it's a really critical part of it because, it can't just be me, right? It can't even just be leadership, right? It's got to be coming from all different directions, both the granular levels of most granular levels of the organization, I would say. And then, if you can get advocates at that level too, then it really, really helps to move things along.
So I think maybe practically, for the owner operators in the group, can you talk a little bit about the specific products that you guys have implemented, the specific outputs that I think are improving your team's processes day to day, or just how you've gone about building this foundational layer over the last 18 months or so?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, one of the things that we did is we just took a hard look at the different solutions that were out there. A big thing I think when you're building any technology platform is you want to make sure that it's flexible. You want to make sure that it's something that'll grow with you or beyond you. So it's the scale, how well they can scale things. And for us, that started leading more and more to like your typical like cloud providers, right? So you look at, whether it's Google, whether it's AWS, whether it's Microsoft, they are all are innovating very quickly and making their tool set, adopting kind of open source or whatever are the most popular tool sets that are out there in the market. So we were already on Microsoft Azure. And with that, we made the decision to move to Fabric. So we were actually built everything in Microsoft Fabric. Being a Microsoft shop, it just makes it that much easier, right? There's all the integration. There's super easy integration with Power BI across the Office suite. And the ability to use like those cloud providers does give us access to, spin up Snowflake, to spin up Databricks and those pieces. So for us, it's always been about flexibility, right? And how do we keep that flexibility in our decisions? Because, I think, you've already heard, I'm sure, in some sessions today, and you'll hear more of it. Nobody knows what's going to happen in 2 or 3 years, right? But I can guarantee if you're not on a flexible platform, you're going to have problems. And so that really has become a key kind of tenet of how we've planned and rolled things out.
I guess the flexibility is extra important in your case because if you are a vertically integrated owner operator, you get to make the PMS decisions, but because you're a third-party property manager for a large amount of units, a lot of your clients are bringing their own PMS, and you have to be flexible in normalizing all of that data and ingesting into your system, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of the challenges. I think you hit the nail on the head. Is like we have a technology stack that we like to think of, that we like all of our clients to use. But at the end of the day, like they're going to come with whatever they have, and we're not going to chase away work because they're using a different PMS or they're using a different solution. So for us, it is about being as flexible as possible. And so you do run into instances. I mean, there are still solutions out there that makes it really hard to get the data out. So, for anybody who's on that side, I would just encourage you guys to always be sort of challenging that that kind of practice of where, hey, it's our data, we need to get the data out of it, because then it makes it much easier when our teams show up that it's like, oh yeah, they actually have an API that you can pull data in or whatever the way is. But that is a big key because we don't have the ability to impact those decisions.
Yeah, could we spend a little bit of time there? So I think you're saying in some ways best practice is to pull the data out of the PMS and into your own data lake. I think if you're a smaller owner operator that may not have the overhead of an RPM, do you think the off-the-shelf tools are good enough to enable an approach like this at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think actually the if you have the right solutions in place and the right partners, getting the data isn't as big of a leap as it was in the past, right? I mean, even pulling data from the big PMSs or the smaller property management systems out there, like they have made it a lot easier. I mean, I've only been in this industry for about 5 years now. All my experience was outside of it, and I remember walking around and just like asking people about APIs, and they would be like, "I don't even know what that is. Like, what are you talking about? Oh, we can get you an Excel file or something." And so, like, I think this industry has changed a lot too. So yeah, not everybody's going to necessarily stand up a team, right? But I think being able to find a partner, again, that'll kind of scale with you, because I've had conversations where it's like, hey, we'll manage your whole, lake house. You don't need to stand up your own lake house. We can do that for you, right? So I know that there are vendors out there, and I think the important part, again, is just making sure you've got that flexibility built into it, but that you are aggregating that data, because you can't get to the more advanced analytics. You can't get to AI. You can't do, do all the great things that you hear people talking about, whether it's AI workflows, agentic workflows, unless you have a really strong data foundation. So it is a critical part for your organization.
Yeah, I guess on this topic, we're contractually obligated to ask about AI. I think every
Right.
RETCON panel. What's RPM's approach to AI today? How do you expect that to change over the next couple of years? Are you guys encouraging in any way structurally grounds up experimentation with your employees? Is it more of a top down push? Can you just talk a little bit both about, I think conceptually how you guys are thinking about AI, but also organizationally how you're thinking about encouraging experimentation?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it certainly is coming from the ground up, but it also is coming from the top down. I think, my arrival at RPM was a big part of that. And so like the focus and the urgency around setting up that data foundation is as much about setting up that ability to leverage AI, right? So we are already beginning to move more into the predictive analytics and building that off the data we have, starting getting more into prescriptive as well, right? And those are all things we're working on this year. And then we're already starting to look at AI workflows and agentic workflows, right? I think property management, as most of you I'm sure already know, it's a lot of repetitive process, right? And there's just a lot of patterns that you can see that are just tailor-made for AI workflows, and then ultimately even agentic workflows. And if we can take that work off of the teams, because nobody enjoys doing that work anyway, and just give them time back in their day to give a better experience to residents, or even if it's for our corporate team, to our on-site teams, I mean, that's a huge win for us. So yeah, we're all in, and it's about like doing it now and not necessarily saying, oh, in 2 years or next year we're going to do it. Let's start right away.
Do you have any theses on where the initial ROI or the initial use cases will lead to the biggest productivity gains or the best ROI? I think everyone's experimenting around leasing, around chatbots. I think we've seen some flow into maintenance. We've seen less on the corporate overhead side, but that may be where the cost savings are most significant, right around accounting or accounts payable ingestion or other use cases. But like, do you guys have any initial theses on where the early adoption will be and where you'll see the most value?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really going to impact on the corporate side. I think accounting actually is a great example of that, right? So I mean, it technology enables scale. Like that's just the facts of it. So if your intent is to grow, you need technology to do it, right? If you are going to be, even the earliest forms of technology, like I need to move a rock from here to there. Somebody made a wheelbarrow, now I can move 2 rocks, right? It's always been that way. So I think that still is the defining factor of technology. And there are things when you look on the corporate side, even to where you see like certain things like ratios in place, right? Well, for every X amount of units, I know I need Y, corporate accountants or property accountants or whatever it might be. And what technology can do is shatter that. And that's where I talk about like that opportunity for the workflow to use like AI workflows or agentic workflows. It helps you to shatter those kinds of that glass ceiling that's being put on top of the company. So
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, I think the real estate industry generally has had exactly what you're saying, which is there's certain rules around property management, right? In territory, I need XYZ headcount to do this. I think, we're seeing some version of that getting disrupted with Square, saying, hey, we don't need 10,000 employees. We actually only need six, right?
Right.
So I think it's coming for everybody. Hopefully not VCs, but everybody else. I guess one other question just around your technology adoption and some of the point solutions you guys have rolled out. Like, where have you seen significant ROI? What are some technologies where your teams just have either seen savings in terms of their time spent or ROI in terms of incremental revenue generation? Like, what's moved the needle for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, so we've got a pretty good. I don't know if it's necessarily. I guess you'd call it a case study. Like, I don't know if it's necessarily a success story, but I think it's successful in that it describes how like healthy organizations work. So we were actually working when it comes to like renters insurance. We were building our own internal application to audit, track, and basically like literally standing up our own platform for it. And we had put in like well over a year worth of almost up to 3 years of building out this application, right? And through that time, we had onboarded about 34 properties, I want to say, to it. But like, again, part of the reason why I think RPM has been really successful is like the willingness to go to where maybe there's a little bit of discomfort. And so we just asked the question, like, is this actually still providing value? Like, we know why we started here, but are we actually going to be able to achieve this? And after we took a hard look, we're like, the industry has already solved this problem. Like, why are we creating our own system, right? And there's different tools out there. Like, we actually moved to Get Covered for that. But we went from 34 properties over like literally over 2 years to 800 properties in like 120 days. So I mean, but it's that kind of reflection I think is really important, and I think that's also representative of like a product-led approach to where it's extremely common in industries outside of real estate, and I think extremely common in technology industry where I spend a lot of my time. But kind of bringing those sort of thoughts and seeing that represented at a company like RPM has really been exciting.
That's great. And I think one of the interesting like through lines I've heard in all of your answers is there's this incredible sense of agency where you've come in with a bit of an outsider's perspective, and I think in the real estate industry, things move at a glacial pace, right? Like Yardi today is going to look like Yardi tomorrow. It's going to look a lot like how Yardi looks in 2 years, right? And I think it's easy to get discouraged in a environment where if you were to stack rank all the industries and how quickly they're going to adopt AI, real estate's probably, below the line, right? So how do you think about just being that change agent within your organization, driving change, while also bringing everyone else along for the ride? It's like, can you talk a little bit about that? I think you may have a good analogy from
Yeah.
biology, but
Right.
yeah. What's motivated you to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it in every industry, to be honest, and yeah, it's certainly in real estate. You could say that things could move pretty slow, but I think anywhere where you're bringing change to an organization, the organization ends up acting like any sort of healthy organism would act, right? And all of a sudden, these white blood cells show up, right? And they're not really there to like talk to you or negotiate with you or understand you. It's like they want to just eliminate you. Like, you're this foreign body that you're coming in and you're saying something that they don't necessarily agree with, right? And it starts off with like, you kind of get the, we don't really do that here kind of things. And it's a bit clunky in the response, but then eventually, you start getting where people really start digging in, right? And they want to understand priorities and they want to understand budget, and they're slowly trying to erode some of the momentum maybe that you've worked so hard to gain. And I think that's the key word to it is, when you're coming to a company, you're going to encounter these things. You have to expect them. You have to be prepared for them. But you also have to focus on building enough momentum that by the time they really show up in force, it's already too late, right? The organization's already kind of saying the words that you say, and you've already delivered results on it, that people really start reacting positively to it, that they no longer have a case, right? So I think that is a big part of it.
All right. Thank you, Anthony. If there's any other questions for him, I think he'll be hanging around for a bit. So
Yeah, absolutely.
awesome.
Thanks, everybody.